Good afternoon, everyone. It is the Panda Planeswalker here, and today I've got a special video for you guys. Budget Modern 8 Rack Deck. Now, I know some of you guys are wondering what the Rack Deck is. Rack Deck is actually a pretty fun deck. I've played it a few times. I love it. It is essentially a discard deck that makes you uh, force your opponent to discard all of their cards, and then using an artifact called the Rack and another enchantment that does pretty much the same thing, it will deal damage to them if they have three or less cards, pretty much, or one or less. It's pretty much all about making them discard their cards and then them take damage if they don't have anything. But this deck is roughly about $50 on TCG Player, Star City Games, and a few other websites. Um, Originally, the deck that I had built, the budget version, was around $70, but that was once you added the sideboard. And I decided to take that out, and I'll put ideas for sideboard in the description box. But for now, I'm just going to give you the $50 deck. So let's get started on your win condition. Okay, so pretty much for your win condition, you have 1 mana colorless artifact. The Rack comes into play. You choose an opponent at the beginning of that player's upkeep. Rack deals X damage to that player, where X is 3 minus the number of cards in his or her hand. Pretty much, you want them to get down to 0 cards every time. That way they'll take 3 damage every time. Pretty much, as long as they have less than 3 cards, you're always dealing damage. Otherwise, it's not doing jack. Next, you have the 1 black enchantment, Shrieking Affliction. Does the exact same thing, but if they have 1 card or less at the beginning of their turn, they lose 3 life. It's pretty simple, and you can, it's obvious to tell what you want to do in the deck. But now that I've shown you your win conditions, we're now going to start off with the discard spells. Alright, so we're going to be running a playset of these 2 cards. These are our 1-drop discard spells. We have Blackmail, a 1 black sorcery. Target player reveals 3 cards from his or her hand, and you choose one of them and make them discard that card. First off, it's good because it lets you at least know part of what your opponent has in their hand, and lets you start removing things that you don't like. Then we have one of the best one out of our 1-drops, Raven's Crime. Target player discards a card with a retrace. What retrace is you can cast the card from your graveyard, discarding a land and paying its mana cost. Pretty great card in this deck, especially once I get into the lands, which lands are actually going to be pretty simple, but they work perfect in this deck. Alright, now I'm going to show you the higher cost discard spells, and we'll go from there. Okay, so what we're going to have now is 2 double black sorceries and a 1 black, 2 colorless sorcery. We're going to start with that one first. It's Stupor. It's a sorcery. Target opponent discards a card at random and then discards another card. This one's good because it doesn't let them choose at least one of the cards that they have to discard. So you could end up making them discard a bomb or the card that they just top decked and needed. It's really great overall, and I 2 of them, or even a playset if you want to make room for it. Next, we're running Wrench Mine. 2 black sorcerer spell. Target player discards 2 cards from his or her hand unless he or she discards an artifact card from his or her hand. This is great against this is great against pretty much every single deck because it makes them discard 2 cards unless they're playing Affinity, and they discard probably a bomb artifact that they need. Playset, of course. Next, we're running a playset of Smallpox. This card is used in quite a lot of control decks. Double black sorcery. Each player loses a life, discards a card, sacks a creature, and then sacks a land. So they are losing a life and putting 3 cards into their graveyard for the price of 2 mana. This is literally the best uncommon in this deck. Now that I've gone over our discard spells, I'm going to go over the creatures that help keep this deck alive. Alright, now we've gotten to the creatures, which is pretty much what's going to help keep your deck alive. We're running 6 creatures only, however, and I know some of you don't like it, but it's best to run these guys because they help with the deck perfectly. First off, we're going to be running a playset of Augur of Skulls. 2 mana 1/1, that for 2 mana you can regenerate or sacrifice it to make an opponent discard 2 cards at the beginning of your upkeep. Pretty much it's a mind rot for 2 mana with 1 upkeep. And a Cunning Lithomancer, 3 mana, 2/2 human wizard that makes each player discard a card during your upkeep. So, yes, this is more than likely going to die before anything else. However, it is going to force your opponent to use a removal spell, making them lose a card in their hand, making there be less cards in their hand, allowing for the rack and your enchantment to deal damage more easily. Not to mention, even if this guy stays alive, your opponent is still losing a card, even though you are as well, but it is well worth it. Run 4 Augur and 2 Cunning Lithomancers only, however you can experiment to see how you like it better. Okay, and here are our removal spells for this deck. We're running a playset of Victim of Night, a 2-black instant spell that destroys a non-vampire, non-werewolf, non-zombie creature. This is decent against most decks, as your meta might more than likely be Goblin Guides and humans. And if you don't like it, you can always change it to something else like Doomblade. Smother is much better in my opinion, simply because it destroys a target creature with converted mana cost 3 or less, which is most aggressive decks. In fact, it's actually quite a lot of decks in Modern. And the creature can't be regenerated, and it's only for 2 mana, so I do recommend picking up these guys, as many of you can actually. And if you want, you can always make a playset of Smother, or if you don't like either of these spells, you can just switch them out for something else that you want instead. Okay, so now we're at the last part of the deck, and it's the lands. Of course, I didn't feel like dealing with the most boring part of it first this time, so I went ahead and just put it to the very back. Your deck is pretty straightforward. It's mono black, so you're pretty much just going to be running swamps and Dakmor Salvage. Now, I know some of you guys might not understand how Dredge works, but Dredge is actually perfect in this deck because of a earlier card, as you might remember, that requires Retrace. Retrace is you pay the card's mana cost and discard a land. Now, Dakmor Salvage is perfect for this because, yes, it comes in tapped, however, it has Dredge 2. If you would draw a card, you can instead mill 2 cards and put Dakmor Salvage from your graveyard to your hand. Pretty much mill 2, get it back from the graveyard. It's perfect because you can constantly play that card, discard your Dakmor Salvage, next turn mill yourself for 2, keep doing it over and over and over and over again non-stop. It's perfect. And of course you have the 19 lands, or swamps. But you can always change out your lands if you don't like them. I do recommend getting eventually a playset of Dakmor Salvage, but there are quite a lot of Dredge decks out in the Eternal formats, so you might not find many of them at your local game store, if any. They'll probably have already been bought out, but don't try and let that stop you from building this deck. You can always order these online. Dakmor Salvage is maybe 50 cents. You probably got plenty of swamps. I mean, if you don't, you're doing something wrong. But anyway, guys, this has been a Modern budget 8-rack deck. I hope you guys like it. Please like, favorite, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.